Hi, I'm Kelly Monaco. I'm currently unemployed, so I created this channel to earn some extra income. I'll be updating you with the latest news about the Drama General Hospital.
Hello and welcome back. Now we'll talk about what's happening at GH on Monday, April 13th. The night Jordan is wheeled into surgery does not feel like a moment of hope, but like a threshold between everything that has already been broken and everything that might still shatter. Inside General Hospital, the operating room becomes more than a place of medicine. It becomes a battlefield where past choices, buried fears, and unspoken truths begin to collide. Isaiah stands at the center of it, his hands steady, his voice controlled, yet his mind anything but calm. There is something about Jordan's condition that refuses to settle into the familiar patterns of trauma he has seen before. It is not just the physical damage, not just the internal bleeding or the fragile line between life and death. It is the way her body reacts, the subtle inconsistencies, the signs that suggest there is more beneath the surface than anyone is willing to admit. As the procedure begins, Isaiah feels that unsettling awareness are growing stronger. Every decision he makes carries an unusual weight, as if he is not only trying to save a life, but also trying to uncover a truth that no one has yet named. He recalls the fragments he has observed, the tension in Jordan's body before she lost consciousness, the erratic signals that do not fully align with a simple accident. These details begin to form a pattern in his mind, one that suggests Jordan may have been under psychological strain long before the crash. The possibility that her state of mind contributed to what happened unsettles him deeply because it shifts the narrative from random tragedy to something far more complicated, something rooted in fear, pressure, and perhaps even manipulation. Outside the operating room, Curtis waits in a silence that feels heavier than any confrontation. He clings to the version of events he has already told, the one that keeps certain truths hidden and certain names unspoken. But as time stretches on, that version begins to feel fragile, like a structure built on unstable ground. Every passing minute intensifies his internal conflict. He knows what he chose to omit, knows the moment when he decided that protecting certain people mattered more than complete honesty. At the time, it felt necessary, even justified. Now, with Jordan's life hanging in the balance, that choice begins to feel like a burden he can no longer carry without consequence. When Isaiah finally steps out to give an update, there is something in his expression that immediately unsettles Curtis. It is not just concern, it is doubt. The kind of doubt that suggests the story is not as simple as it appears. Isaiah does not accuse, does not confront directly, but his questions carry a quiet intensity that cuts deeper than any direct challenge. He asks about Jordan's state before the accident, about the moments leading up to it, about anything that might explain the inconsistencies he has observed, and in those questions, Curtis feels the walls closing in. Because the more Isaiah searches for answers, the more likely it becomes that the truth Curtis has buried will surface. That realization sparks something volatile inside him. The fear of losing Jordan collides with the fear of being exposed, and the result is an emotional fracture that threatens to break him apart. He begins to question his own decisions, replaying them with a clarity that feels almost cruel. If he had spoken differently, if he had chosen transparency over protection, would things feel different now? Would the weight on his chest be any lighter? The questions offer no comfort, only a deeper sense of inevitability. Because no matter what he tells himself, the truth has already begun to move, to shift, to demand its place in the open. At the same time, another story unfolds in the shadows of Port Charles, one that carries its own kind of danger. Brook Lynn is no longer standing still, no longer waiting for consequences to find her. She is running, not in a reckless, impulsive way, but with a desperate clarity that comes from knowing there is no safe place left behind. Every street feels watched. every sound amplified by the fear that she is only one step ahead of being found. The accident that started everything refuses to stay in the past. It follows her not just as memory, but as something alive, something that reshapes her every thought and decision. What makes her situation even more dangerous is not just the act itself, but the transformation it triggers within her. Brook Lynn begins to cross lines she once believed she would never approach. Small decisions made in panic start to build into something darker, something that no longer resembles the person she used to be. She tells herself that survival requires sacrifice, that every step she takes is justified by the need to protect what remains of her life. But beneath that justification lies a growing awareness that she is slipping further away from redemption. Each choice carries consequences, and those consequences begin to accumulate in ways she cannot control. There are moments when she almost stops, almost turns back, almost considers facing what she has done. But those moments are fleeting, crushed by the overwhelming fear of what awaits her if she does. The thought of arrest, of public judgment, of losing everything she has fought to rebuild becomes too much to bear. And so she continues forward, even as the path ahead grows darker. The line between victim and perpetrator begins to blur, not because her actions are excusable, but because her state of mind is no longer stable. She is not just running from the law, she is running from herself. As these two storylines move closer to collision, the tension in Port Charles reaches a breaking point. Isaiah's growing suspicions, Curtis' unraveling composure, and Brook Lynn's desperate flight all feed into a larger sense that something irreversible is about to happen. The surgery becomes a focal point, a moment that could either stabilize everything or push it further into chaos. If Jordan survives, the truth may finally have a chance to surface through her. If she does not, the silence she leaves behind could bury that truth even deeper, turning suspicion into something far more dangerous. In the end, what defines this moment is not resolution, but escalation. Every character stands on the edge of a choice that will shape what comes next. Isaiah must decide how far he is willing to go in pursuing the truth he senses beneath the surface. Curtis must confront whether he can continue to carry the burden of what he has hidden. And Brook Lynn must face the reality that running cannot erase what has already been set in motion. The deeper she goes, the harder it will be to return. The storm is no longer building, it has already begun. And as it spreads through every corner of their lives, it becomes clear that whatever comes next will not be gentle, not be forgiving, and not be easily undone. The danger circling Jocelyn is no longer distant or abstract. It is tightening, patient, and methodical as Ross Cullum begins to shift his attention toward the inconsistencies that others have overlooked. In the volatile world of General Hospital, suspicion rarely arrives with noise, it builds in silence, in the small fractures between what is said and what is real. Cullum thrives in that silence. He does not rush to conclusions, does not expose his hand too early. Instead, he studies, he waits, and most importantly, he connects patterns that were never meant to be seen together. And Jocelyn, despite all her efforts to maintain control, has started to leave traces behind. At first, it is nothing more than a subtle shift in her behavior, a heightened awareness that makes her seem guarded even in moments that should feel safe. Cullum notices the way she watches exits, the way her responses come half a second too quickly, as if rehearsed in advance. To anyone else, these details might pass as nerves or stress, but to someone like Cullum, they are signals, fragments of a larger truth waiting to be assembled. The possibility that Jocelyn is more than she appears begins as a theory, but it does not stay that way for long. For Jocelyn, the pressure is relentless. Living as a covert agent of the WSB has never been about glory or control. It has always been about survival. Every interaction carries risk, every conversation a potential threat. She understands that one mistake, one moment of hesitation could unravel everything. And yet, what makes her situation unbearable is not just the danger of exposure, but the isolation that comes with it. She cannot confide in the people who care about her, cannot reveal the truth without placing them in the same line of fire. So she carries it alone, building walls that grow higher with every passing day. Cullum's investigation does not just threaten her identity, it threatens the fragile balance she has managed to maintain between who she is and who she pretends to be. As he digs deeper, the space between those two versions of herself begins to collapse. She starts to feel it in the smallest moments, in the way her instincts override her emotions, in the way trust becomes something she can no longer afford. The mission that once felt like a choice now feels like a trap, one that is closing in with every step Cullum takes closer to the truth. What makes Cullum especially dangerous is not just his intelligence, but his patience. He does not need immediate proof. He only needs enough to confirm his suspicions, enough to corner Jocelyn into a position where denial is no longer possible. And when that moment comes, he will not hesitate. For him, this is not just about exposing an agent, it is about control, about proving that no one can move within his reach without being seen. Jocelyn represents a threat to that control, and that alone makes her a target he cannot ignore. At the same time, Jocelyn begins to feel a shift within herself, something darker and more instinctive. The need to survive starts to override the need to hold on to her former self. She begins to consider options she once would have rejected without hesitation, deception layered on top of deception, alliances built on necessity rather than trust. The line between defense and aggression blurs, and with it comes a growing fear that she may not recognize who she becomes if she continues down this path. This internal transformation is where the true danger lies. Because while Cullum is closing in from the outside, Jocelyn is changing from within. The longer she remains in this world, the harder it becomes to return to the life she once knew. Every decision she makes pulls her further away from that version of herself, replacing it with something more calculated, more detached. It is a survival mechanism, but it comes at a cost. She is only beginning to understand. As Cullum's investigation reaches a critical point, the tension becomes almost unbearable. There is no longer any room for error, no space for hesitation. Jocelyn knows that the next move could determine everything, whether she escapes, whether she is exposed, or whether she is forced into a confrontation that will change the course of her life permanently. And in that moment, the question is no longer about whether she can protect her identity, but whether she is willing to sacrifice what remains of herself to do it. The story unfolding is not just one of espionage or pursuit. It is a story of identity under pressure, of the slow, relentless erosion of certainty in the face of survival. Cullum represents the external threat, the force that seeks to expose and control. But Jocelyn's greatest battle is internal, a fight to hold on to something real in a world that demands constant deception. And as those two forces move closer together, it becomes clear that whatever happens next will not leave either of them unchanged.
I'll be back at the General Hospital soon. We'll see each other again soon. Thank you for supporting my channel. Goodbye and see you again.